Hello, welcome to the 11th session of this course, CSS for Dummies. In this 11th session, we're going to talk about CSS background property. Now, background color we have already talked about in previous sessions. More specifically, we're going to explore some of the more other background related properties in CSS. So, background color is something we have already talked about. Including this, we will talk more about how we can add an image as a background and a few other features with it. So, let's begin. Now, CS background properties basically we use to add background effects, background design to our component. So any component you are using, whether it's your h1 heading tag, whether it's your paragraph tag, whether it's your anchor tag, any tag basically you're using, you can apply this basic background properties to it. Even your image tag, you can set an image background as well. If image is small and you want to occupy a more larger area for a image, you can do that. You can use unordered lists or tables, whatever tag basically you are using, you can use the same thing on all these tags. Okay, how what we can do with the backgrounds, so let's just explore this. So the first thing is we use a background color. So with this we'll do, it will set the background color. We have seen the examples of this in previous class, and then we give a color name. Okay, so this is something we have already talked about extensively. So for example, in this slide, this yellow is the background color. Okay, and then we have something called background image. How sometimes we don't need the color, we want to have an image. So for example, in this slide itself, we see this light background as an image. How do we set that up? We use an property called background image. So when you use dash image, now basically means you are telling CSS that I want to set an image to be the background of my web page. Okay, and this time we need to provide the URL of my image. Okay, so we are going to use the built-in URL function. We're going to provide it a URL of your image, and then that image will basically be set as your background image. As simple as that. Similar to the colors. Okay, so as soon as we use background color, we get the background color of any of these tags. Okay, or any other tags for that matter. So the list goes on here. For almost every tag, you can set the background color, the background image. If you're using background image, do ensure that you give a URL and a proper supported format. So by default, the GIF is supported. You can use the PNG as well. You can use the JPG as well. These are some of the standard formats that we use, and they are very easily supported as well. Okay, so either it's PNG, either it's JPG, either it's GIF, or any other supported format that the browser support, you can use that. But these three typically become one of the famously and commonly used formats around the world. So stick with these three things and you should be fine. Okay, this becomes the path. So this is the URL path of your image. So usually we keep this image or all the images we use inside of a same folder. This is a relative path, means wherever I've saved my HTML, I've saved this image in the same folder. Once you set an image, the image will appear as a standard standalone image. Sometimes we want to set it as no repeat or just repeat. Okay, so you can set this as a repeat as well, which basically means that if you have a large web page and there's a small image here, so this becomes my small image, what repeat will do, it will repeat the image across all as a tiling effect throughout your web page. Okay, sometimes we don't want that. Sometimes we just want a one big large image to appear in our web page as a background. So we will set it no repeat. So this is an additional attribute, additional property that we specify in CSS, telling our CSS that the background image is this, but do not repeat it or repeat it if you want it to be. Okay, so background dash repeat is another property we use, and we tell our browsers not to repeat it. So no repeat will not repeat it. It will be a single image. If you set it to repeat, it will basically be tiled across it. So by default it's tiled. Okay, then the third or more attributes we can associate with the background. Once you have an image set to it, these usually work with image. So for example, if you set it to color, then repeat is no point. So with this color, you don't use this. So this is absolutely useless. You need to use repeat with the background. Okay, so if you're using an image, then set a repeat attribute. But if you're not using an image, there's no point of using this with the background. Similarly, attachment as well. Okay, so if you're using color, the attachment does not work with the color as well, because color is just a simple color. Okay, if you're using an image, then you need to use this attachment property as well. What this attachment property will do is that, for say, if you want to scroll this page down, okay, so if you scroll, then what should happen to the image? Or if this is a single image as well, if you're scrolling it down, should the image be there throughout the web page, or should it scroll upwards as well? So we use it either fixed or scroll attribute. So when it does a scroll, it means that you want to scroll the background as well. If it is fixed, it means that the front content will change, but the image will be fixed as a background. Okay, so these are two additional properties that we use with CSS after the image. So once you use the image, then the first attribute we set is background. The second is this attachment, whether it should be fixed means that when you scroll the page, the image should stay there, or it should scroll. So that means that if you scroll the page, the background will also scroll up. So it means sometimes we have a very large background image, we create a very large one, and we want the page to scroll with it. Okay, so knowing these two attributes are quite important. So we use the attachment property, and we provide these fixed or scroll values with our background. This is done. Then once we also have additional property if you use the image. So if you're using image, these basically goes with it. So with the image, we have another property called position. So how do you want to position your image as a background? Do you want it to be on the right top, top left, center, alignments? All these basic values can be. So you can have a right top, basically means that if this is my screen, I want it to be on starting from the right top. Okay, or it can be right center. So if you set it to center, it will basically means that right center will be somewhere here, or you can set it to left top. Okay, so if you set it to left, it basically means that I want image to be on the left top. Usually we just leave it to center. Okay, so we just set it to be center, so that ensuring my image basically as a background appears on the center of the page. Okay, so these are certain attributes that you need to understand, that okay, you can control various different aspects of your background if you are using background image. If you are just using as a background color, so for example, a background image typically we would set to a body tag. So if I'm using a body, and I would set this tag here. Okay, so the body will have, this will basically means that now my entire web page has a background to it. If you are just using this for a anchor tag, so if an anchor tag you want to have a background logo behind it, okay, and then the text should appear over that logo, then maybe these properties might not be there. So you just have to understand where to know where to use these properties or where not. So don't use unnecessary properties and confuse your web pages and confuse your code as well. So if you are using a small image around a certain anchor tag or certain image, then these fixed scroll right top properties would actually do not matter, because they are just going to be around the simple component. However, if you are using an image around a body tag, now it means it's going to overlap and wrap your entire content of your web page. Then you would be required to use this no repeat, attached, position, and these properties as well. Okay, so we can use for a background color, we can use this shorthand property, just a background and RGBA values can be provided, and we can specify these settings as well. So commonly we use this position, attachment, repeat when we are using image tags. Okay, so I hope this basically explains what we are going to do. Okay, additionally we can associate a third property with the background. So in my case, for example, if you look at the slides, the slide has a background, but it's very opaque, it's transparent, it's not so prominently shown. That's because I've set the transparency level to a very low value. Same thing you can do within your browsers as well. You can set up an image, but you can set its property value to a very low, its opacity value to a very low. So we use another attribute called opacity, colon 0.3. Okay, what this basically means that I just want the opacity to be 0.3%. So if you set it to 1, it's normal opaque. By default, every component has a 1 opacity. So if whatever component you create, whatever style you apply to it, will have default 1 opacity. So you don't need to write the opacity for anything. But if you want to change the opacity, that's when we start using this opacity property. We give it a value in terms of points. So 0.5 would mean 50%, 0.6 is like little bit less, and then 0.3 would means even less, and then as the lower number you get, the lower the opacity of that background image becomes. So this is quite useful. So if you are setting up a background as an image on a particular web page, you change its background opacity to make it a little bit light, so that the front end contents can be more apparent to it. Okay, so I hope this basically clarifies several different things. So this is what we do when we work with background property of it. So we set a color or an image. If you set an image, do keep in mind that there's a property called repeat, there's called an attachment, there's a position where we control the scrolling, the position, and the repeat feature of our simple image, and then we can also control the opacity of it. So if you don't want it to be completely opaque, you can actually lower the opacity as well. Do remember this opacity is not connected with the background. Okay, previously all these have background means they are all associated with the background property. However, opacity can be used with other CSS styles as well. So for example, you can just set a normal image and have it opacity. You can have certain components designed and you can lower their opacity as well. So this opacity is a general attribute that can be used for any property, for any tag, and you can basically reduce its opacity with it. So in this case, because we have a background color green, and so this is there's no image here associated. So we even using the background color, and then we are setting its transparency level. Okay, so it works with images also, it works with other tags as well. So opacity is there. This is again something that is very useful to control how a component might appear. Wonderful. So 1 is by default 1 and 0 is 3 there. So I hope this clarifies the things. So if any questions, anything, do let me know, and I will try to explain things in much different way. So now let's begin, go further and talk more about something called borders in next session. See you.